Daily Rake. I'm Eugene Debs, and the mug won't rake itself, so let's jump in today. Breaking news now. William M. Tweed, better known as Boss Tweed, was arrested on over 200 different crimes, including larceny and forgery. Boss Tweed was infamously the political boss of Tammany Hall, a Democratic politician from New York City who held strong influence throughout the different sectors of the city. Tweed has become the face of dishonesty, greed, and the corrupt system of political machines that run the politics and governments of America's greatest industrial cities. However, today, on October 27, 1871, justice has been served, and we have our reporter, Thomas Nast, on the site now. Thomas, do we have you?
Hello, sir. My name is Thomas Nast, and I've contributed to cracking down on Boss Tweed's corruption scandal in the past couple of years. Political machines have taken over America and corrupted America for too long, so I'm glad to finally hear of his arrest.
Mr. Tweed, what do you have to say for yourself?
I thought I could get away with it if it wasn't for those meddling journalists. Under my organization, Tammany Hall, I was able to give poor immigrants housing and jobs in order to secure their vote. With the increasing immigrant population, my power only grew. My massive political machine used the power of kickbacks to maintain order over local governments and fill my pockets.
What are kickbacks?
Kickbacks are a form of bribery in which I get poor workers to build infrastructure and I receive a cut of the building's profits.
At least you will face justice.
You may have got me this time, but I'll be back, and the reign of political machines will never end. Ha ha ha!
Skipping ahead 25 years now, this election season is heating up. William McKinley appears to be ahead in the polls. However, that is no surprise. He's received an unprecedented amount, $10 million in political campaign financing, mostly by large monopolies and trusts. The Democratic nominee, however, is a rising star, William Jennings Bryan. Born and raised in Illinois in 1860, this 36-year-old congressman comes from an incredibly influential side of the, increasingly influential side of the political scene. A populist, Bryan represents the new agrarian politics of the West. So before me today, William Jennings Bryan.
Thanks, Eugene. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, thank you for joining us today. Let's jump into the questions. I would like to start off by asking about this new populist movement.
What was that, Eugene? Eugene?
Mr. Bryan, Mr. Bryan, do we have you?
Oh, well, we've seen this movement begin rooted back from the Farmers Alliance, the Greenback Party, and unions that are sprouting out across the industrialized portions of the country. There's a majority of people who are suffering under the weight of the monopolies, trusts, and corporations, and are joining together to fight for their rights as workers and for their dignity as human beings.
So who exactly does this populist party appeal to?
Populist policies appeal to anyone who wants to see the poor producing classes prosper. Miners, industrial workers, farmers, and the working class. We see a lot of support coming from the West, but people in cities, rural areas, and everywhere really, they're all calling for a populist change, and it's coming.
Interesting. Now, what are some populist policies? Mr. Bryan? Mr. Bryan? It seems we've lost the connection. Anyways, his answer would have probably been the government ownership of railroads, or at least some sort of government intervention or regulation of railroad rates, a gradual income tax, the right of union to collectively bargain and unionize, right of labor to collectively unionize, and of course, the coinage of silver. Also, my notes here is something called the sub-treasury plan, and I'll just ask him when he gets back on. Mr. Bryan? Oh, good, you're back. So, Mr. Bryan, what exactly is a sub-treasury plan?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Look, All across the country, especially in rural areas, workers and agrarian farmers are being exploited by monopolists, railroad tycoons, and bankers. Farmers are struggling under a financial trap of debt and credit. Populists argue that a sub-treasury would construct warehouses where farmers could store grain and crops. Farmers could take low risk loans and then use their grain as collateral. This simple plan would basically remove the banker's boot away from the neck of our nation's farmers and allow our nations of workers to truly prosper.
Right, and another populist policy that you strongly support is the coinage of silver. Explain this policy further, and what would it mean for most Americans?
I do. I fully support the coinage of silver to a 16-to-1 ratio. I mean, an inflationary monetary policy that would basically inflate crop prices, helping farmers across the nation. McKinley is very against silver, defending the gold standard that only supports the richest elites and monopolists.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bryan. I wish you luck in your campaign, and thank you for joining us today. Have a good day. Good afternoon. It's me, Eugene Debs, and we have some breaking news to cover. President Theodore Roosevelt has just signed the Pure Food and Drug Act, as well as the Meat Inspection Act. These acts passed after the meatpacking scandal, when influential author Upton Sinclair released his novel The Jungle a few months back. The book wrote about the inhumane working conditions that meatpacking workers were put under, as well as the unsanitary conditions that the food was prepared in meat houses. The novel illustrates some of the horrible hazards that Sinclair observed in the meat houses. Human fingers in food, blood and organs poured across the floor, and workers falling into chemical vats, completely disintegrating. Luckily, the novel has triggered national outcry for safer and cleaner conditions. The Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act mandated sanitary factory conditions, the inspecting of meat and other animal products, and the correct labeling of products. While this is good progress, workers in these factories still face egregious working conditions. A statement was released from Upton Sinclair himself, where he said, and I quote, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit the stomach."
Welcome to the 1912 Daily Rake presidential debate. I'm Chris Wallace, and before me we have America's next president, out of an uncommon choice of 3 candidates. The American people will decide who will lead America for the next 4 years during these trying times. So let's send in our candidates. First we have former President Theodore Roosevelt, representing his Bull Moose Party. Representing the Republican Party, President William Howard Taft. Wow, President Taft, you're looking like a changed man.
Ho, ho, ho. Thank you, Chris. After getting stuck in the White House bathtub, First Lady Helen Taft put me on a diet.
And we finally have the New Jersey governor, former president of Princeton, the egghead who knows it all, Woodrow Wilson. So, let's begin with the foreign policy debate. What would each candidate's foreign policy look like? President Roosevelt, you may start.
Under my administration, America carried a big stick. We sailed our great white fleet across the globe, and the United States of America was a name that carried respect and veneration. We started the construction of the Panama Canal and got Latin America to answer to us through the Roosevelt Corollary. As president, I spoke softly. We whispered about peace and love, but at the same time, we paraded around our immense naval power and showed the world America's exceptionalism.
President Taft, and you?
America used money to influence Latin American partners. An example of this was our intervention in Nicaragua, China, and Mexico.
Governor Wilson, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Under my administration, support will only be given to countries whose beliefs are similar with the U.S.
Thank you for that insight. China has become a growing issue. How would each of you administrators deal or interfere with China? President Roosevelt?
America.
Smart words. How about you, President Taft?
My administration would continue the open door policy. We must protect the equal privileges for all countries trading with China and for support of Chinese territorial and administrative integrity.
And Governor Wilson?
America must ensure China reflects the same moral values as America and the rest of the Western democratic world.
All right. Thank you for this information, gentlemen, and I wish you luck in your presidential races. Sorry.
Did
for coming. And you're watching the Disney Channel. No, I thought we were watching the presidential debate.
Keep going.
And you're watching the Disney Channel.
We sailed our great